I thought my life had come to a peaceful end after cutting ties with danger years ago. Little did I know, danger had followed me home. My son Derek and his wife Fiona pretended to care. One evening, they invited me for a boat ride to remember old times. The water was calm, the lights soft, until I felt cold chain links around my ankle and the boat began to sink. I gasped, fought, begged. Fiona whispered with chilling calmness, "See you in the next life." And Derek just watched. They declared me dead, stole my savings and property, and held a funeral while mourning publicly. But death couldn't keep me silent. When I walked into that funeral, alive, breathing, their faces froze because a woman they buried had come back. My name is Marjorie Drake. I'm 63 years old, and I truly believed my son wanted to repair what was broken. When Derek invited me for a quiet morning at the lake, I felt a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. His wife, Fiona, walked beside him with that polite, icy smile she always wore around me. Too polite to question, too sharp to trust. But I pushed my doubts aside. I wanted my family back. The gentle water, the rising mist, the promise of a peaceful day. It all felt like a fragile dream. I didn't know that dream was about to become a nightmare, one carefully crafted by the two people I loved most. The moment we drifted into the deeper part of the lake, an unsettling silence settled over Derek and Fiona. Derek gripped the oars tightly, avoiding my eyes, while Fiona tapped her fingers on the boat's edge as if she were impatient for something. I tried to make small talk, but every attempt felt awkward and unwanted. The stillness around us grew thicker, heavier, like the world itself was holding its breath. When I glanced behind me, I noticed a heavy duffel bag tucked under the seat. Nothing wrong with the bag, except it looked too weighted, too intentionally hidden. A chill went through me. But before I could ask anything, Derek finally spoke, and his voice sounded nothing like my son. Derek leaned forward, eyes cold in a way I had never seen. "Mom, you know Dad left everything to you, right?" His tone wasn't curious, it was calculated. Fiona folded her arms, narrowing her eyes as if studying prey. My heart slammed in my chest. Of course I knew about the inheritance, but Derek had never cared before. I swallowed hard and tried to steady my voice. "Why bring that up now?" I asked. Fiona smirked. "Because you won't need it much longer." The words punched the air from my lungs. The lake suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, too far from anyone who could hear me scream. And that's when Derek reached into the duffel bag. He pulled out rope. Actual rope. My son, my flesh, my only child. I stared at him, too stunned to react, while Fiona casually reached for the boat's edge like she was about to start a picnic. "Don't make this difficult," Derek muttered. My mind scrambled for explanations. Was he joking? Testing me? Losing his mind? But he didn't look unhinged. He looked determined. Fiona leaned closer and whispered, "It'll be easier if you just sit still." The betrayal hit me like freezing water. All the birthdays, the scraped knees, the nights I held him when he cried. Had he thrown it all away for money? My breath trembled as he moved toward me. Before I could react, Derek looped the rope around my wrists, tying them with a precision that told me this wasn't impulsive. It was planned, practiced. Fiona checked her watch, tapping her nail on the glass. "The current gets stronger in 20 minutes, she said casually, as if she were discussing the weather. Panic crawled through my veins, but my voice refused to work. I tried to look at my son, really look, but the boy I raised wasn't there anymore. In his place stood a stranger shaped like him. "It's nothing personal," Derek muttered. "Nothing personal? Killing your mother wasn't personal?" My stomach twisted as the boat drifted farther from shore, sealing my fate. The moment Fiona stood, I knew the end was coming. She walked behind me, grabbed my shoulders with surprising strength, and forced me toward the edge. "Goodbye, Marjorie," she whispered, almost cheerfully. Derek didn't even look at me, not once. He simply stared at the horizon as if I were already gone. The betrayal sliced deeper than any physical wound ever could. I tried to plead, to remind him of who I was, but Fiona didn't give me the chance. Her push was swift and merciless. The water swallowed me whole in seconds. Cold, heavy, silent. My wrists are bound, my lungs are burning, their voices are fading. My son had chosen my grave. The lake dragged me downward like a living creature. My legs kicked wildly, desperate for air, desperate for life, desperate for one more chance to understand why the child I raised was killing me. My fingers clawed at the rope, scraping skin, but nothing loosened. Darkness crept into the edges of my vision. I could faintly hear Fiona laughing above the surface, her voice distant and cruel. My last thought wasn't about money. It wasn't about betrayal. It was this heartbreaking truth. Derek didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Then everything went black, and I surrendered to the water, unaware that fate wasn't done with me yet. When I woke on the muddy lake bank hours later, coughing water and barely conscious, I realized Derek and Fiona must have assumed I drowned. By the time I dragged myself toward a nearby cabin to seek help, the police had already been alerted about my disappearance. Except the search was a joke. They circled the lake once, asked a few lazy questions, then filed a report stating there was no sign of survival. Fiona had even cried dramatically on camera, begging them to keep looking, while Derek stood beside her with a carefully crafted, broken expression. Their act worked. Within 48 hours, the investigation shifted from rescue to recovery. I was officially presumed dead, exactly as they planned. While I fought fever and exhaustion in that small cabin, Derek wasted no time securing what he really wanted. He met with lawyers, submitted fake statements, and pushed to access my accounts before any thorough verification could happen. The moment my presumed death paperwork was processed, he gained full authority over my estate. All my savings, the home I built with my late husband, the land passed down for generations, everything transferred into Derek's control. Fiona posted a tragic message online about losing the woman who raised my husband, gaining sympathy while celebrating privately. To them, I was no longer a mother. I was in a bank vault, finally opened. 2 days later, they arranged a massive funeral. Over 200 people, most of whom hadn't spoken to me in years, suddenly showed up to cry for a woman they didn't really know. The hall was beautifully decorated, all in white, as if Fiona wanted to showcase her taste rather than honor my life. Derek rehearsed his grief, brushing away invisible tears while accepting condolences like a celebrity accepting awards. I imagined them soaking in attention, loving every second of it, never considering that I might still be alive somewhere. What they didn't know was that someone at that funeral would unknowingly help me reclaim everything. When Fiona stood at the podium, she delivered a speech dripping with false affection. "Marjorie was like a second mother to me," she said, her voice trembling just the right amount. People nodded, touched by her grief, completely unaware she had pushed me into the lake with her own hands. Derek sat in the front row, head bowed, pretending to wipe tears. Guests whispered about how strong and loving they were, calling them the perfect couple. Watching a video of that eulogy later made my blood boil. She painted herself as my devoted daughter while stealing not just my life, but my legacy. Their performance fooled everyone, for now. The obituary appeared the next morning, printed in black and white, declaring my life neatly concluded. Neighbors delivered flowers to Derek's doorstep, offering support for a grief he wasn't even feeling. News traveled fast, and soon my phone, still at home, was filled with messages from people mourning me. The world had decided I was gone. That realization stung more deeply than the betrayal itself. It was as if my existence had been erased with a simple announcement. But their certainty became my shield. If everyone believed I was dead, then I was free to move in the shadows and free to prepare. With the obituary and police report finalized, Derek moved swiftly to claim every remaining document attached to my identity: titles, deeds, bonds, everything. He forged my signature more than once, confident no one would question it. Fiona accompanied him to every office like a proud partner in crime, ensuring all legal transfers went smoothly. They celebrated publicly, posting photos of family healing after tragedy. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in that lakeside cabin, slowly regaining strength, watching their every move through friends who still believed I was alive. Each forged signature lit a fire inside me, every stolen document with another thread I'd soon unravel. Within 10 days, every asset I had ever owned was legally transferred to Derek. My home was listed for sale, my savings were accessed, even my late husband's watch collection, something priceless to our family, was pawned off without hesitation. Fiona strutted around town wearing my jewelry as if she'd earned it. Derek acted like a king, finally free from the burden of caring for an elderly parent. They believed they had won. They believed the world would never question them. They believed I was gone forever. But something neither of them knew: the woman they tried to kill was not only alive, she was coming back with proof, allies, and a plan stronger than their greed. When I opened my eyes again, everything was blurry. The sky, the trees, even my own shaking hands. A stranger hovered above me, shouting for someone to bring water. His name was Jonas Hale, a fisherman who had been checking his nets when he spotted my body tangled near the reeds. He told me later he thought I was dead until I gasped for air. Jonas carried me into his small cabin and wrapped me in blankets while I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I finally managed to whisper my name, he froze. Not because he recognized me, but because he recognized the obituary posted online just hours earlier. According to the world, I wasn't alive, yet here I was, breathing again. Jonas insisted I stay hidden in his cabin, far from the eyes of anyone who knew Derek or Fiona. My body ached, my lungs burned, and my wrists were deeply bruised, but my mind was razor sharp. Every hour brought back clearer memories: the cold water, Derek's expression, Fiona's push, the rope cutting into my skin. Anger fueled my healing. Jonas helped clean my wounds, brought me food, and let me close. We used an old prepaid phone to check updates online. Seeing pictures from my own funeral sent a deep chill through my chest. I realized I couldn't just expose them. I needed to destroy everything they thought they'd gained. Quiet revenge would not be enough. Once I could walk steadily, Jonas helped me return to the dock at night, both of us moving quietly to avoid anyone recognizing me. The boat Derek used was still logged in the rental system. The duffel bag had been removed, but scratches on the wooden bench and rope fibers on the floor were still there, small details that proved a struggle. Jonas photographed everything. We then visited the town office where Derek had submitted paperwork the day after my death. The timestamps were impossible. They were filed too quickly for someone grieving. Fiona's signature appeared on multiple documents she legally had no right to have had. I knew then that their greed would be their downfall. All I had to do was pull the thread. I needed someone who understood the law better than Derek ever could. That's when I contacted Elias Rowan, a former lawyer and one of the few people I trusted with my life. When he heard my voice, he thought it was a cruel prank until I described things only Marjorie Drake could know. Elias drove 2 hours to meet me at Jonas's cabin, his face pale with disbelief when he saw me alive. We spent the entire evening reviewing every document, photo, and post Derek and Fiona had made since my disappearance. Elias immediately spotted fraudulent transfers, illegal signatures, and forged medical statements. "This isn't just inheritance theft," he said quietly. "This is attempted murder." Elias pieced together the timeline with precision. Derek had accessed my accounts before the police even stopped searching. Fiona filed multiple false affidavits claiming I had verbalized end-of-life wishes. They transferred property illegally, altered my insurance policy, and even pawned my heirlooms within days. Elias shook his head in disbelief. "They didn't even try to cover their tracks," he muttered. Everything pointed to a coordinated plan made long before that boat ride. Their greed made them sloppy, their confidence made them stupid, and their assumption that I was dead made them vulnerable. For the first time since the lake, I felt power returning to me, quiet, sharp, and unstoppable. As Elias reviewed the evidence and Jonas packed food supplies, I stared at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror on the cabin wall. The woman looking back was not the mother who once waited by the phone for her son's calls. She was someone sharpened by betrayal, strengthened by survival, and fueled by a fire Derek and Fiona had ignited themselves. Elias suggested going to the police immediately, but I shook my head. They had staged my death. They had celebrated my funeral. They had stolen my life, so I would take it back in a way they would never forget. I wasn't returning quietly. I was returning loudly enough to shake their world. The funeral home was still open for visitors, offering a final chance for people to say goodbye. Derek and Fiona had extended the viewing for an extra day, likely to collect more sympathy. Elias insisted on arranging a police escort, but I refused. "Not yet," I said. "They deserve to see me before the law gets involved." Jonas offered to drive me. With a long coat, scarf, and hat covering most of my face, I prepared myself for the moment the world would see the woman who wasn't supposed to exist. My breath trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. I wasn't just going to walk back into my funeral. I was going to end theirs. Jonas parked the truck a block from the funeral home so no one would see us arrive together. I tightened the scarf around my face, feeling my heartbeat rise with every step toward the building where my own portrait hung in a gold frame. Inside, soft organ music played while guests murmured about what a kind soul I had been. They had no idea the woman they mourned was standing right behind them. I kept my head low and moved slowly through the crowd, unnoticed at first. My palms were sweating, my breath shaky, but my resolve was iron. This was the moment Derek and Fiona's perfect performance began to crack. The funeral speeches started with Fiona stepping forward, acting as though grief had carved new lines into her face. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, glancing at Derek for approval before launching into another performance. "Marjorie was a mother to us both," she said, voice trembling just enough to be believable. The guests nodded sympathetically, unaware they were listening to a murderer give a eulogy. I stood in the back, listening to every lie while the air around me tightened. A woman behind me whispered, "Poor thing, losing her mother-in-law so soon." I almost laughed. If they only knew who was standing inches away from them. As the coffin was prepared to be lowered for a symbolic farewell, something inside me snapped. I pushed back my hood, removed the scarf, and stepped into the center aisle. Gasps spread like fire. The funeral director froze mid-motion. A man dropped his program. Fiona's hand flew to her mouth, the color draining from her face. Derek took a step back as if he were staring at a ghost. I could feel 200 eyes locked on me, their shock heavy enough to silence the entire hall. "Before you bury a woman," I said clearly, "you should make sure she's actually dead." The silence shattered. Derek stumbled, grabbing the pew for balance. His eyes darted around, searching for a way to deny what was happening, but the truth stood right in front of him. Fiona tried to hide behind her mother, but her trembling gave her away. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few screams. Someone shouted, "Is this real?" Another cried, "She's alive!" The room pulsed with disbelief. Derek's face twisted from shock to panic, then to a desperate attempt at composure. "Mom, this must be a misunderstanding," he stammered. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "The only misunderstanding is that you thought I wouldn't survive." Fiona nearly collapsed. I reached into my coat and pulled out the folder Elias prepared. Boat rental logs with timestamps, photos of rope fibers, a timeline of forged signatures, bank transfers executed hours after they claimed to be grieving, witness statements, even screenshots of Fiona's fake affidavit. I laid the evidence on the table beside the coffin, each sheet landing like a hammer blow. The guests pushed closer, reading in stunned silence. Derek's jaw clenched as sweat gathered on his forehead. Fiona shook her head frantically, mumbling, "This is fake! This is all fake!" But no one believed her anymore. Their masterpiece of lies had finally cracked wide open. Murmurs grew into shouts as people began connecting the dots. Friends who once comforted Derek now stepped away from him with disgust. A man confronted Fiona, demanding to know how she could lie at a funeral she orchestrated. Her mother tried to defend her, but even she couldn't explain the forged documents staring her in the face. Security hovered uncertainly, unsure who the real threat was now that the dead woman had returned. Derek attempted to speak, but every word he uttered only made him look guiltier. The room no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the truth. The funeral director refused to continue the service. The coffin remained suspended above the lowering platform, a grim symbol of their unraveling plan. Guests began filing out, whispering, calling relatives, and recording videos. Derek and Fiona stood paralyzed, unable to escape the disaster they had created. Fiona finally broke down in loud, dramatic sobs that fooled no one. Derek sank onto a pew, staring blankly at the documents that had destroyed his future. As the last of the crowd dispersed, I walked past them without fear. "This is just the beginning," I whispered, and for the first time, they believed me. But trust me, what happened next changed everything in a way no one expected. If you want to hear the final twist, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss what came after this. Police surrounded Derek and Fiona before they even understood what was happening. Marjorie stood behind the officers, no longer shaking, no longer afraid, simply steady. The detectives had reviewed the recordings, the bank transactions, the forged signatures, and even the boat's damaged hull. Everything pointed directly to Derek and Fiona. When Derek tried to protest, the officers cut him off and presented the arrest warrant. Fiona burst into tears, realizing their plan had completely collapsed. Guests who once believed their lies now whispered in shock, stepping away from them as if betrayal were contagious. For the first time in years, Marjorie felt like the ground beneath her was solid again. The next morning, Marjorie sat across from the bank's legal team, who apologized repeatedly for failing to question the suspicious withdrawal requests. Every document Derek forged was now evidence, and slowly every asset, her home, her accounts, her land, was officially restored. Watching those papers reverse everything Derek tried to take felt like breathing after being underwater too long. The bank even offered additional compensation for the emotional damage caused by their negligence, something she never expected. When she walked out of the office, people she passed recognized her from the case on the news. Some nodded respectfully, some looked guilty for believing rumors, but all finally saw her for the truth she had always been. Derek had always cared more about status than family. He built his entire life on the illusion that he was the perfect son, the successful businessman with a flawless marriage. But after the arrest, the truth spread faster than wildfire. His company shareholders removed him within hours, investors pulled out, and neighbors who once praised him now kept their doors shut when reporters came knocking. Fiona's friends publicly distanced themselves, pretending they had never supported her. Derek tried to contact Marjorie from jail, but she rejected every attempt. He had made his choice the moment he let her drown. Now the world saw him exactly as he was, a man who destroyed himself through greed. When Marjorie returned to her home, it looked almost unfamiliar. Overgrown lawn, dusty windows, silence heavy in every room. Derek and Fiona had neglected everything, using the house only as a tool for their schemes. But now, with ownership restored, she opened the windows, let in the sunlight, and felt life return to the walls. Friends and neighbors offered help repainting, repairing, and restoring the garden. For the first time in months, she slept without fear. She brewed her morning tea, walked barefoot through her yard, and felt peace settle into her bones. This wasn't just her house again, it was her sanctuary, her proof that she had survived what was meant to destroy her. As the story went public, people approached Marjorie, some elderly, some widowed, some disabled, sharing how their own families had tried to exploit them. Their voices trembled the same way hers once had. Marjorie realized her battle wasn't just personal anymore. She began volunteering at a local advocacy group, helping vulnerable people protect their rights and assets. She sat with them during meetings, helped them understand legal documents, and shared her experience openly. Every time she guided someone towards safety, she felt another piece of her own healing click into place. She had once been alone in her suffering, but now she had turned it into a shield for others who needed it most. The court awarded Marjorie significant financial damages, restitution for attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and emotional trauma. Instead of holding on to it all, she created a small charitable foundation in honor of her late husband, Leonard. The fund supported elderly individuals who faced family exploitation, offering lawyers, counselors, and emergency housing. Reporters praised her for choosing compassion instead of revenge, but Marjorie didn't do it for praise. She did it because she knew exactly what it felt like to scream and not be heard. Now, because of her, dozens of voices were heard loud and clear, and that, she believed, was the purest form of justice. Marjorie stood at the edge of the same lake where her son and daughter-in-law tried to end her life. The water was calm now, quiet, almost peaceful. She carried a handful of white lilies, the flowers her husband once loved. As she released them onto the water, she didn't think of Derek's betrayal or Fiona's cruelty. She thought of her own endurance, the woman who survived drowning, lies, theft, and abandonment, yet still found a way to rise. The lilies drifted slowly, creating ripples that shimmered in the sunlight. Marjorie whispered a soft goodbye, not to her life, but to her pain. She walked away stronger, lighter, ready for whatever came next.